We're going to all just give JT a round of applause. Awesome stuff. We want to add a lot of value to the city of Tallahassee. We're going to do it in some interesting ways. Good stuff. So what I want to do is go ahead and get into talking with JT Burnette, and I've had the pleasure of having this conversation with JT a few different times. This time is going to be special because we're sharing it in a broader context. I'm going to break this thing up into a few different parts, and the very first thing I'm going to call it, the first part I'm going to call it the early years. How did you get started, brother?
Well, Vince, let me start off by just saying, thank you for our community and kind of working on building this culture. This is the real opportunity for this community, and we're ready for this. And you're here at the right time. Timing is half the battle.
Absolutely.
Well, I grew up a fairly simple life. I grew up in Monticello, Florida, small town, 30 miles east of here, and I didn't grow up in a really harsh environment. But what I did do is that kind of when you're raised by somebody that's kind of a generation separated, you kind of, as bad as you feel the separation between you and your parents, you feel that almost at a multiple. And I realized early on that, I enjoyed creating things. I literally, at 14 years old, was raising chickens and selling chickens. That gave me enough money. I bought a computer, and I really was a tech geek. I ran one of the biggest bulletin board systems in the Southeast. So it was very interesting. Then I turned 16, pretty much turned the computer off and could care less about it. The whole game changed when I got a set of keys. From there, I basically went in the roofing business. So at 18, go ahead.
Right, and I don't want to stop you, but I want to talk a little bit about this bulletin board, because this bulletin board is an interesting component to who you are, I believe so.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that? Tell us about the experience with the bulletin board and you wanting to really take that thing to the next level.
Yeah. So, most people in here, maybe there's some folks in here that can kind of remember the sound of the modem dialing up and connecting. But before what we have now, which is constantly online connection, the internet, people, private individuals, this literally started off being ran by ham radios, okay? Where, the ham radio was like the generation before me, so I don't want to talk a whole lot about the ham radio piece because I don't know a whole lot about that. But what would happen is that people like me and other people that would collaborate and bring all of the information, news, before basically what we have today is email. They had what's called FidoNet and different email networks where what happened is you come to my bulletin board, you would write an email, it would batch that to a hub, distribute it out. The only difference is this only happened maybe 4 or 5 times a day. It wasn't something that was constantly connected. But it was basically email before, what we experience as email. I was roughly about 15 years old at this time, but I basically built this, what was the largest one? I had roughly a 15 node, right? And what that means is you had 15 phone lines that people could dial into, and expanded out. And I actually went and basically thought, look, what we ought to do is get an AP subscription, and I think people will actually pay for this, actually for a news component. And I actually talked my grandmother, who was my dad's mother, who that side kind of abandoned us, quite frankly, and felt bad, had talked her into giving me $70,000 to build this, basically the biggest one in the country, and basically start charging for service. Well, I go down to UF, and my grandmother, my dad's mother, was actually supervisor of elections. And she had this guy who was a consultant who ran all the computer systems for the supervisor of elections. And he was basically the computer science guy at UF. And I went down, and she was actually going to give me the $70,000 out of pure guilt. Let's be honest, it was pure guilt, right? I went down there and met with him, and he came back and basically told my grandmother that nobody would ever pay for this service. Would never happen. Kind of what happens in that era is that I turned 18 and for whatever reason I studied and I got my roofing license like when I was like 3 or 4 days after my 18th birthday. You couldn't get it until you were 18. And I went to Panama City and a hurricane had hit Panama City. I was a 18-year-old kid, really didn't know a whole lot about, a lot about roofing, but man, I just read the books. And I didn't know what I was doing, but man, I sounded like I knew what I was doing. Right? May not have a clue, but man, I mean, people that roof don't know the terminology, right? So when you're sitting there throwing out the terminology and the guy's been roofing for 20 years doesn't know, and in front of a committee of people, they don't have any confidence in that guy for whatever reason. And I get up on the roof and I realize that all these tile on this roof are cracked. So I call out this adjuster and the guy came out and quite frankly, he didn't want to get on the roof. He really had no desire to get on the roof. He was scared, right? And when you're 18, you shoot out there in front of him and he's like, he doesn't want to really show he can't keep up, Well, I found all these cracks in this tile and I showed him, this guy goes, man, he goes, get off the roof. He goes, these things are going to fall off and hit and kill somebody. We got to replace all these things. Well, it ended up being a $1.5 million job that I got when I was 18. And, it's really a hard work and luck. I mean, so fearful that I wasn't going to charge enough, I made sure I charged enough. And in like 4 months, I basically used 30 temps. I got up there and worked every day up there by myself. I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning, got everything ready. People started at 6, knocked off way after we should. And I made like $750,000 when I was 18.
So tell us a little bit about value, because I know that, you went from like 40,000 to a million. How did that happen? And value, how does that come into play? Because I know a lot of people are building, things and doing things, but really don't know how to value things. I think that this is a story about value.
Yeah, I think there's actually a better story kind of about value. So I get a call from a client, and they're in Miami. This is after a hurricane had hit. And we went down, my partner and I flew down, literally, we're flying into an airport and planes are just rolled over on the side of the runway where these planes were just blown over. They had cleared off the runway so people could land. People are evacuated and we fly in. And we go to this job and there's about $30,000 worth of damage, okay? Now, keep in mind, we just took a $10,000 flight from Tallahassee to Miami to go look at now what looks like a $30,000 job, and we feel like we have truly wasted our time. So, Mark said, look, let's just, our cost is 30 grand, let's just double it and charge them 60. And I said, Mark, it's really not worth going down there for 60. Let's charge them 100. That makes sense. And Mark, not knowing what he was doing, he goes, let's just add a 0. And I said, Mark, I don't want to go down there. I said, heck, let's do it. So we submitted that number at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we had a signed contract back in our hands by 4 o'clock that afternoon. Now, the most interesting thing, right? So what you would think is that somebody just got screwed, right? The happiest customer we've ever had. Because it was the value of what they needed done, right? So often in business, we look at things as a price of cost and not a price of value, right? Let me tell you, the only mistake that we made related to that proposal is we didn't put a 2 and a 0 because it was worth it to that customer to pay that. And they would have signed that contract at $2 million just as fast as they would have signed it at 1. But it's understanding when you're in situations and understanding the value of what you're providing, not just the markup of cost of what you're providing.
Powerful. And before we transition into the next, because there's another thing that you've told me kind of, we're talking together and we're trying to build my thinking. That's really, really powerful. And it's the story about the prison. The story about the prison, I think, is phenomenal, and it talks to fortitude and hard work. Can you give us some insight about what happened with the prison situation?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of back up and tell you where this roofing story left off. It sounds good. I leave Panama City, and my father lives in Valdosta. For whatever it's worth, I'm kind of an open book. I think after it was all said and done, I paid taxes. I left Panama City with like $800,000 or something. I don't remember exactly, 500, 800. You know, I'm 20 years old. I think never working again. You know, like I got this. And my father, at this point, you know, he got out of prison when I was 16. I moved back to Valdosta to build a relationship with him. He had a construction license. Was working with this construction company called Mighty Mouse Construction. They were building hotels. Normally when you build hotels, a general contractor builds it and they use all these different subs. And quite frankly, those subcontractors finance the job, right? But they were actually self-performing all this stuff. So they needed somebody to kind of finance all of this stuff, like all of this payroll. So I'd started a payroll company in Valdosta. Well, so at 20, you know, I'm top of the, you know, as good as it can get. At 21, I have a $1.7 million payroll out to this company, and they file bankruptcy. So you do the math. I went from 800 to the good, right, to 900 in the hole. Okay? And at this time, my dad was 51 years old. He's quite a bit older than my mother. And my dad felt responsible for what happened. And he said, look, JT, he goes, you're never going to get out of this. He goes, you're in a hole that you just can't get out. And by the way, my older brother's working with me. He literally goes mute, okay? When I mean he can't speak, he cannot speak.
Like no time.
I mean, like nobody home for 2 days. And I remember I was at Wendy's, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, you know what? My dad got out of prison at 51 with nothing. I said, I'm 21, so I got a long way to go. I said, I'm not going to quit, because my dad was actually, what he was going to do is he said, look, go file bankruptcy. I got this family farm. I'll give it to you. You can start up. And I walked out and I said, you know what? I can do this. And I went, and literally I was selling labor to anybody you could ever imagine. I mean, I was in Dillard's, Lowe's, distribution. I mean, if you were a manufacturing business in Valdosta, by God, you were having to run me. I got carried off by security twice because I was going in there to go sell you labor. 1 year to the day, okay, well, first of all, let me back a little bit. So Capital City Bank, a guy by the name of William Mills, had this loan, right, to this 21-year-old kid, $900,000 gone and no collateral, okay? In the banking world, this is not good. It's not good. 1 year to the day, I paid William Mills back that $900,000. And I was working on the roof at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The funny thing is, I was re-roofing the housing facility that my dad was in for 9 years. Wow. And I meet a guy by the name of Phil Knight. And Phil Knight is head of regional facilities for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And I'm 25 at this point. And Phil and I actually become really good friends, right? Because Phil knew that he could count on me, right? And a long story short, 80% of contracts that are issued with the Federal Bureau of Prisons end up in failure. Because people don't realize what it takes to work. But on the night, I was at my girlfriend's birthday party, and Phil Knight calls me at 10 o'clock at night. And he says a tornado has hit the institution in Marietta, the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Marietta. He said, look, I need you to drive into a hurricane because we have lost communication with everybody on site. So at this point, I'm driving west on I-10, trees blowing across the road. I call my brother and I said, get in the car, drive to Marietta. He's like, no way. He said, that's into the hurricane. I said, Caleb, get in the car and go. He says, okay, bad idea, but I'm gonna go. So I'm on the phone, and the Bureau of Prisons has no communication with this facility. And they're on the phone with a 25-year-old kid, right, is all they have. So I'm driving over there because they can't send their people into these conditions, right? And I was dumb enough to go. So I drive over there, and at this point, all of the ranks of the Bureau of Prisons, all the way to the director of the Bureau of Prisons, is all on this conference call with me. Which, by the way, I was halfway a waste of time because the wind was blowing 55 miles an hour. And it wasn't like they could hear a whole lot I was saying until I got behind a building or hit a hole or whatever. But I pull up this institution. I mean, of course, they're in high alert. I mean, these guys are pointing machine guns at me, right? And I'm like, here, you know, talk to this guy. And, you know, I basically became that link of the communication they had. But what had happened was it literally had wiped out the powerhouse. It had knocked down part of the fence, the whole 9 yards. But what happened was the guy flew down from D.C. the next day. We negotiated a contract on a napkin, a federal contract on a napkin that afternoon for $9 million for me to rebuild that prison. I brought in 150 guys. They moved the inmates out. We literally lived inside the prison. I literally lived inside this prison for 90 days. And I rebuilt that prison in 90 days, the damage, and I made $3 million. So I had gone, right, I was back again, right? I've gone and now I've come back. But you just, again, it was a value situation, and it was somebody willing to sleep in a prison bed. Wow. And what I thought is, again, I thought, well, this is a one-time event. This is never going to happen to me again. But what actually happened was this: $9 million. They gave me $30 million a year worth of work after that, because they had never had a contractor go sleep in an institution and sleep 4 hours a day. You know, when I showed up on that job, they had all of these vehicles that had blown into the fence, and they couldn't find the keys. And the head of that prison system was out there trying to find the keys because they needed this fence back up. And I said, and I just got 25 guys, and we just went and picked the car up. And that guy literally said, he goes, everybody at the Bureau, he said, just get out of their way. Just stand down, get out of their way. And, but what it shows is that when people see that you're willing to do what it takes, because I can tell you, when they told me to rebuild that institution, I didn't start when we had a contract the next morning. I started that night, right? And what people like to see is that people taking the initiative, right? Not being afraid and moving forward and having a level of trust. Because trust is a thing that people trust you when they know they can, when they know that you can, when you trust them, they trust you.
Wow.
Right?
So powerful.
And that's what happened.
Give them a round of applause. I don't know about y'all, but in the tech world, you know, I mean, what I hear a lot, especially in the startup culture, you know, we're willing to eat ramen noodles for a couple of years to get our idea off the ground. But when you hear really compelling stories, when people go the extra mile, what is the extra mile becomes the interesting question. And though it's not tech and it's not about apps and building, you know, the next cool thing, it's about hard work and perseverance. And so I love that story, and I'm glad that you shared that with us and that you were open. But let's move it forward. Let's go to where we are now. You're the principal of Anchorage, which is powerful. You're involved with Hunter and Hart. You're making big moves in the city. In fact, where we're sitting in right now is a project that you actually had your hands in as far as College Town and really, really redefining what Tallahassee is all about. Can you give us a little bit of insight about where we are today and where you see us going in the future?
And when you say that, you kind of mean related to Tallahassee.
Yeah, Tallahassee. And what does Tallahassee mean to you? Let's just start there. What does Tallahassee mean to you?
Yeah, so, I mean, until Hotel devolved, really never did a whole lot of much of anything in Tallahassee. I mean,
and that's a hotel that you built.
Yes, well, renovated Hotel Duval, I think in 2009. Devoted 18 months of my life to it. Probably wouldn't do it again if I had to do it all over again. But I mean, we work on 22 different military bases across the country. You know, Tallahassee, you know, I actually looked at a job report, and we've only done one project in Tallahassee in 4 years. So Tallahassee isn't really a place for me where I like make a living, right? But it's home to me, which is very important. There's such an opportunity here. I mean, I sit there and I just think, like, you know, you have all of this talent here, and it's like Tallahassee's got like this sweet tea mentality, like front porch and sweet tea, and we're sitting there with 40,000 kids just at FSU. And I mean, these are innovators. There's nothing sweet tea about this group of people, right? I mean, this is a substantial portion of our population. I mean, we've got to start doing things where people can see that we are innovators. And that was what Hotel Duval was really about to me, right? It wasn't, I never thought that I'd make a lot of money off of Hotel Duval, I mean, I just thought it was a real opportunity to do something cool, right? And what I liked about it is that you could see it coming up Tennessee Street. And I think there's so much that students at this university don't really see the cool things about our community. And let me tell you, it's actually changing, but it was originally kind of by design. Campus is designed to basically have a border, okay? If you drive down Tennessee Street today, every single building on Tennessee Street has its back turned to Tennessee Street, right? It's not designed to go in the front door from Tennessee Street. It's designed to go in the front door from the other side, right? The university, if you landed, by the way, $72 billion worth of decision makers land at Tallahassee Airport, drive up Lake Bradford, drive up Gaines, okay, and go to the Capitol. What do you see as FSU if you make that run?
Wow.
The only building that you can see is the stadium. $72 billion where decision makers make that run, and you could be real right in their face because you're going to beg them for money every single year. And by the way, they wouldn't even know FAMU existed. 1.5 blocks away is the largest historical black college, and those $72 billion worth of decision makers don't even know it's there.
And so that leads me into another question, because I've been part of the Imagine Tallahassee move, and that's another big initiative that you and Kim have spearheaded and brought into the community. Tell us a little bit about Imagine Tallahassee and what inspired you guys to say, you know, we're going to do something about this, we're going to change it.
Well, we were at a chamber conference, and Professor Doggett from Austin really challenged the community to say, you know, what is unique about Tallahassee and what are you going to be doing? And man, I'll tell you, I left there and I felt like the community was fired up. But 4 months later, the fire was gone. It was out. You know. And Kim, actually not so much me, went back and really reviewed that and said, you know, I mean, what is he saying? What is unique about all these communities? And they really, instead of thinking, I mean, I go to all these meetings and look, it's the same 150 people in a room at all these things, okay? It's the same group of opinions, you know, it's the same old ideas. We are missing some engagement, right? We're definitely missing the engagement of the 30 or 40,000 people that are our future, okay? So then I looked back and said, what were the game changers in our community? What moved the needle? And first thought out of my mind is that everything you see is funded by city and county local government. All of our roads, all of this stuff. I'll tell you, I had no idea I was completely wrong. Completely wrong. Now understand, this isn't 5 years ago. This is 18 months ago, right? And I realized in city and county, out of their $1 billion budgets, really only have about $20 million of really discretionary money. It's not a lot of money. I mean, to put that in perspective, Gaines Street cost about $45 million. Okay? That's not a whole lot of money when you see the scale of things. And then what I look back is that it was all funded by Tallahassee. We have 1 cent sales tax initiative. Well, that's roughly $1 billion over 20 years. And it's 100% discretionary. Okay? So do the math. You have 7 elected officials on the county commission, 5 on the city commission. And between them, they are making discretionary decisions related to $20 million, assuming you have to pay for police, parks, the normal goods, waste services, right? This is 18 people sitting on the committee making $1 billion worth of discretionary decisions at one time. That pool of money is what is the needle, is what changes the game. That's what built Capitol Circle. That's what's building Cascades Park. Part of Gain Street's funded through that, right? When you look at all these discretionary dollars and all these game-changing things, they were all funded by that. And what we basically said is this: what are we? What is Tallahassee? What do we want to be? Are we going to go make $1 billion worth of discretionary decisions, not knowing what that is? I mean, that's like I'm going in the banking business and somebody walks up to me and says, let's build a car wash. Sounds like a great idea if you're in the car wash business. But if you're in the banking business, you don't need to be in the car wash business. And we haven't, when you don't know what you want to be, every idea sounds like a good idea. I mean, it's so easy for an idea to sound like a good idea, and if you don't have a direction and you don't know what you want to be, it's all going to keep you off path. You're going to be trying to start a bank and building a car wash, right? It just doesn't work.
And a lot of what's coming back out of the Imagine Tallahassee project, which was birthed out of this idea, is the fact that we do have an entrepreneurial ecosystem that we're trying to build, that innovation and creativity is here. And so that's going to help me transition to where I want to go next, because we've talked about the early year, JT Burnette. We've gone into the bridge years, what happened to you in construction, which actually catapulted you to a completely different place. And here we are now. And when we talk about InBridge and some of the projects that you're working on, one that I'm intimate with is, of course, Stadium Runner, which I think is huge. I want to talk a little bit about that. Where's Connor and Brian? Raise your hands. Everybody clap for these guys. I'm intimate with this project. It was an idea, a concept. You know, I'm an idea guy.
Yeah.
So I spit out the concept about a year ago, and you heard it. And as soon as you heard it, and this is another thing that I like about JT, is the fact that when he hears an idea, he doesn't just hear it. He says, how are we going to do it? Vince, don't come talk to me until you tell me how we're going to do it. And so when we figured out which direction we go in, we started going forward in what's called Stadium Runner. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, so, you know, Vince, I remember sitting around at coffee, and he said Stadium Runner. And I said, don't tell me anything else, I can tell you what it is, right?
Yep.
I said, that's simple enough for me to understand. Because you told me something, and I can already envision what the entire thing looks like, and I know what it is. I know, but the key is, when that conversation had, that was actually what, almost a year and a half ago? Yeah. I said, Vince, then I said, where are the resources, what's going to happen? And it was a conversation for a year, right? And I was a judge at a JMI Innovation, and they basically have an entrepreneurial program, and then basically people present business ideas. Well, at that, we were actually working on another project with Vince called Menuless, and Brian and Connor had something that I thought was kind of similar, and I thought it would be a great idea to kind of connect those together. Well, I'm always a person that says, I don't care really what you've been doing. Yesterday has no value, doesn't matter, right? The question is, the resources that you're going to spend tomorrow do not need to be dictated by what happened yesterday, right? And I look at resources and what are the best way to deploy those resources, and I'm always one that says, look, let's stop and think about where we're about to go and make sure that we're not letting this past guide us to basically force us into doing something that there's a better opportunity. Because what we were talking about is I think Brian and Connor had basically an app for for the restaurant industry. Okay? So what we basically said is, look, let's throw all of our ideas on the table. Stadium Runner was thrown out on the table. Look, what we know is we've got Brian over here, out of the business school, father a lawyer. I mean, truly, Brian, one of the most talented young business people I've ever met without a whole lot of experience.
Let's throw some hands up for that.
Truly. Connor over here, an amazing programmer. I mean, literally looked at something that I think we had spent $150,000 on, and in the grand scheme of things, basically said he could do a lot better. He told us everything that was wrong with what we spent 150 grand on, and said in a couple of weekends I could redo that. You know? And I don't mean redo it. I mean start from scratch and do it all over. Okay. So what I said is that, you know, look, there's two resources here that we need to point in some direction. And that's when the whole idea came back around about Stadium Runner. And Stadium Runners, I mean, is great in a lot of ways, right? You have an institution that's moving to an entrepreneurial institution. This is a good way for them to see, you know, President Barron is talking about putting an innovation officer, which the idea of that is when you come up with an idea as a student, how do you stop all these no's, right? Because, you know, you go in, let's say I got a program that, you know, let's just say it runs the washing machines or whatever. I mean, I know there's one already there, but a student comes up with that, you know, there's 500 people over here to say, no, you can't do that because the insurance of this, of that. And they're trying to move towards providing assistance and basically getting past all those no's. So it was a great opportunity, which also tied into what we're wanting to see is, I mean, I kind of believe that for sure, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, 1% of the 30,000 kids over there are some of the most talented people in the world. Right? I mean, the number is probably higher than 1, okay? But 1 is 300 people, right? The question is, how do we network that university and tapping the talents of those 300 people, right, into really engage? The way I see FSU is its own Google, right? The only difference is it doesn't have anywhere you can search it, right? All the answers are within it, right? But like Google, you can access Google because you know how to enter something in the search box, right? Nobody knows how to enter anything into the search box of FSU, right? And what we hope is that eventually, and this may not be a 5 year, may not be a 10-year, but how do we network that institution enough where we can create a search box, right, where we have something where we understand enough of the institution, all of its resources, to be able to come back and answer these questions. Now, this isn't, you know, how old was George Washington when he died? These are business questions. I mean, one we looked at, I mean, don't think about the idea, just think about how you answer the question. We basically said, okay, how could you create a lid that could take a straw that doesn't leak, right? Let me tell you this, when you have a 2.5-year-old, very important. Because you may understand that you hold a drink like this and you suck out of the straw, okay? The natural thing is to do this, okay? And even though they're sucking through the straw, you're changing clothes 3 times a day, right? But the relevance there is that I wouldn't know today how to have FSU help answer that question, right? I wouldn't know how to find that 300, the top students. I wouldn't know exactly how to go find all of the academics that are able to help answer these questions related to plastics and all of these things, who understand all of these other dynamics. And if we can figure that out, that is, to me, the biggest opportunity we have in this community.
And so now you've got Connor and Bryant working on a program, bringing it to the forefront. Again, innovation leader, pushing the envelope forward. And I think everybody in this room can agree with me that this conversation is important, because what we learned about is hard work. We learned about what innovation really looks like. What happens when you go beyond the envelope and you start pushing things and you start saying what could be, and then putting resources behind those things. So I want everybody to give a round of applause and thank you. in closing, and I asked myself this question yesterday because I've been trying to figure it out. Because he goes around, he has no title, he's nondescript, right? If you had to describe yourself in just 2 words, what would it be? What would you do?
I don't even know the answer to that question. Yeah, you got. I don't know if I can describe who I am, but I know what I want to do. Right? I want to basically tap the talents of people and help them reach their potential. Period. I think, I get sick off seeing somebody running in a circle that has the ability to truly run an amazing distance in a straight line, right? And this has always been a fear of mine. Probably not remotely true, but with the conditions that I grew up in, I never felt like what could I have done if I had resources to do something, right? If I wasn't like, and like with Sophie, I work every day.
Sophie's your daughter?
Sophie's my daughter. Yeah. Because I want, if Sophie has the ability and the potential, I want to be able to make sure that she has the resources to go do it. But you know what? It really doesn't apply to Sophie. It applies to anybody that I run into, right? Because, let me tell you this. You don't get successful without the help of somebody. You just don't. I mean, I don't really know how to explain this, but the guy at that Horizon South, at that condo complex, having the faith in an 18-year-old to do that job, without him, I would have never gotten to round 1. Phil Knight, without having the confidence to call me and me go over there, I would have never had a chance at round 2, right? But you have to look around you, and you have to put yourself with people who can help you. And the person who can help you is usually the person you can help, right? Because I would tell you, I thought I was doing everything, Phil was doing everything for me, but the reality is Phil thought I was doing everything for him, right? 2 people sitting there thinking that the other person is disproportionately helping them. That's when you know that you have a match that's going to be successful, right? We all need that somebody to help us. And if you spend time in your life really focusing on putting yourself with people who can help you, the most valuable word in the business language is the word yes. Because when you say yes, you are committed to something, right? All of your resources, right? And I'm going to use Brian Connor, right? And I'm sure that this is a challenge with them, and they evaluate every day, right? When they said yes to Stadium Runner, they committed their resources to Stadium Runner. And they had to give up a lot of other opportunities to think that that was the best idea, right? That's a risk, right? You have to, if you don't say 100 no's to every yes, and I'll give, Bryant will challenge you on everything, which I appreciate. You have to push that envelope and go, is this worth me doing? And let me tell you this is bad. So many people want to be helpful, right? But let me tell you this. You don't have the ability to help anybody until you help yourself. Okay? You have to help you to be able to help somebody else. Right? You've got to focus on figuring that out. And you've got to go find somebody also that can help you. People, right, with Brian Connor and everybody that's in an organization, they're people that I ran into that amaze me with their willingness to work hard. Right? So you're not going to be loafing along down the side of the street and run into somebody. The guy who can help you is the guy that's going to see you working out there and be amazed by who you are, right? But you got to impress somebody for them to help you. Let me tell you this. There are so many people in the world that will say, I will do anything for you and I will help you. 90% of those people have no ability to help. Okay? And you have the responsibility of identifying who can and who cannot help you. Right? And that's hard. That's not easy. Because so many people, especially when you're talented, want to help you. That's when it becomes exponentially more difficult, right? You're a great quarterback, right? You know how many people say that they want to help you or help you refine your skills? Okay? Lots of people. How many people are actually capable of doing that? Very few, right? And that's the difference between the good and the great, typically. The great are the ones that know who can truly help them and who can't. And that's half the divide, because the people who can't determine that work their butt off and don't ever realize work their butt off for somebody who can't help them. Right? And numbers a lot of times will help you figure that out. Here's a simple math equation. If you want to make $1 million a year, okay? The probability of you ever doing that and doing less than $10 million a year worth of business, almost non-existent, right? How many people think about $1 million a year, but forget to think about that I got to do $10 million worth of business to make $1 million, right? If I'm going out and looking for a client, okay, I know that I need to make $1 million a year. I'm not going to go look for a client that only does $1 million a year worth of work. That guy cannot help me. And if I say yes to him, he is going to stop me from going and seeking out the client that has $10 million worth of work. But how easy is it to say yes to that guy? Wow. So easy.
That's all I've got. How many people in this room were helped? Clap it up. Because it brings things into perspective. In the world of startups, it gets us back to real business. It gets us back to thinking about the things that are important. And I think that's key. I think we can get kind of caught in the buzz and the fluff of the startup world, but this guy brings the real chops. And I appreciate you coming out here and doing the thing.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you're doing here for the community.
I'm trying to make noise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor a little bit for some questions for probably about the next 15 minutes or so. So if you have questions, just raise your hand and we're going to go ahead and fire off. Jillian, what's your question?
I know that we've had this discussion, but I think it's worth bringing up. A lot of people who are starting a business or who have an idea are buying into the Moses myth that something miraculous happens to these people who start billion-dollar companies, and there's, it's just something that's inherent in them, or it just happens, and it's not something that can be accessible to everyone. Can you kind of expand on the reasons why we don't have 8-foot wide cars?
Yeah. So, so many people, I don't know how many ideas I get pitched a week, but it's a lot. So many people don't focus on why things are the way they are, right? They just focus on how they think they can, change. I'm not going to name any particular event, but here's the thing, when you look at hotels, okay, almost every hotel you're going to see is either somewhere between 50 and 60 feet wide, okay? Now let me tell you this, I come up with a lot of cool ideas for a hotel, as long as I didn't have to make it 50 or 60 feet wide. I come up with some amazing things, right? Why do you think they all look the same, right? It's because fire code. It's because of the design components that restrict things from being what they could be, right? Let me tell you this, and you can't overcome those. I don't care who you are. You're going to build a hotel. That hotel has to meet fire code, right? But people don't. The way to learn and be creative is to, in life, understand why everything's the way it is, right? It's not that somebody miraculously, came up with something. The iPhone is an incremental event, okay? But some people think, poof, iPhone happened. Must have been magic, right? It doesn't happen. It's an incremental platform, right? What the people that were able to take it to the next level are the ones that understood the restrictions that had it in its existing condition and incrementally change that, okay? And the reason she's using the car scenario is, look, we could come up with some really great ideas if we could have a 12-foot wide car. I mean, a lot of different creative things. But the reality is that the $4 or $5 trillion worth of infrastructure, the road system, and everything that's built, if you build a 12-foot or 14-foot car, you can't drive it on the road, right? But how many people go, why is a car, you know, why is it this wide? Why is it this tall? Why, I mean, why, right? And every time you ask why, you understand the restrictions and the boundaries of which they had to design within that created this uniformity, right? And it's just so many people stop to look and say, why are the things the way they are? I mean, Drew, I assure you, this place, right? Think about it. It's got one difference. It's got different water, right? It's not that 90% of the business model of running a restaurant's changed. It's got different water, right? That's just an incremental change that makes a big difference, right? Hopefully that somewhat answered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have a kind of similar question. So like when you do startup, right? Typically you run into, you know, big corporations that have more brand power, more human power, and sometimes more resources. And sometimes your idea, you talk about your idea probably really awesome, and then you do, you know, the barrier entry to the market, the technical research. You feel, well, look, like for example, Lockheed Martin do something way better than my idea.
Right.
Or like Northrop Grumman do like that awesome tech. Or the Navy, recent now, they do, you know, amazing tech. So how do you, for a startup, how do you find the niche market?
Right.
Because as specialization go, like one person can only specialize one thing. You cannot specialize anything. So how do you find a niche market, and how do you leverage that niche market to play between the big guys?
Yeah. So let me kind of break out one myth associated with what you said. Most big companies don't come up with new ideas. Okay? They basically, it's too expensive to go through the process of not being right. Okay? Success, I don't really care in what venue you're in, is just on the long side of failure, right? You fail a lot, right? And then you succeed. And I don't care, you know, what industry, what you're talking about. I don't care if you're playing basketball, football, whatever. That's just the way it works. What happens is this. I'll tell you a quick story. We developed the mobile ordering system for Papa John's and sold $1 billion worth of pizzas. So here, we thought the same thing that you thought. We were sitting there trying to go sell it to Drew at Brooklyn Water Bagel and all of this stuff because we were afraid that the big guy would steal our idea. Papa John's, right? If Papa John's heard about our idea, they got our idea, they would steal it, they would go do it, and they'd leave us behind. You want to tell you what I realized? Those big companies don't do anything. Papa John's, when we were working with them, didn't even send out their own email. They used a vendor to send out their freaking email. Okay, now understand that I'm talking about 2008 now. I'm not talking about 1990. Okay? They were dying for somebody to come in and take and run that individual component. Papa John's could have never afforded internally, nor did they have the resources to ever be able to accomplish doing that. Right? Lockheed Martin, Google, all these things, most of them are an acquisition of which they eventually integrate into their main application. Right? They are dying for small business startups to create that niche thing because here's the thing, I'm an investor, okay? I mean, why is seed capital so hard to get your hands on? Because it's so risky, right? The reality is there were $17 million worth of screw-ups to get to that idea. They can't afford to lose the $17 million to get to that one. most of it, believe it or not, a lot of it happens at the institutions, right? Because institutions, the way I like to say is, take a ruler 12 inches long, business is like 6 inches. Institutions are out here literally at the 12-inch line. I mean, they're way out there, right? And they're educating and training all these people. And look, here's the thing. Why am I interested in this as an opportunity? Okay? Stadium runner with Brian and Connor will probably cost, I mean, I'm just going to give a rough number, $150,000 to develop a real working piece of software. And hardware. There's a piece of hardware with this too. I looked at doing it with Brand Information Systems, the company that we have that, you know, has 60 programmers making $100,000 a year. It would cost $1.2 million. Here's the thing. I'd take that risk with Brian and Connor, but I would never take that risk with Brand. Big companies are the same way. They're interested in those startups out there taking that risk, basically getting it almost there, then they help companies cross the finish line.
So let me ask you this question. This piggybacks off of that, and it's an interesting concept. So is it wise to look at, if you're looking at developing a software, a solution, or something that you're bringing to the marketplace, looking for a bigger animal or a bigger target that made acquisition early in the game to help you co-develop or purchase the technology, or you know they're going to purchase the technology because it's something that they need?
So I'm going to use, so many people want to design like a POS, a point of sale system. I mean, it's just kind of like a go-to thing. What you need to find out is, you know, if you're going to create a car, don't try to recreate the wheel in the car, right? I mean, use the components that are already out there. Understand how what you do different is the niche into the platform that's already there. Mm-hmm. So many people call me, they want to like recreate the whole platform. And all they really want, and what they're not looking at is, look, what I really want is this platform to do this one function different, okay? In most situations, if you can build a better bumper, okay? If I can build a better bumper, that doesn't mean that I need to build a better car, okay? Somebody will buy the bumper from you. You do not have to go build a car to sell the bumper, okay? But so many people think they got to build a car to sell the bumper. And you know why? Because they don't have to go deal with anybody else if they think that they can do the whole thing themselves, right? And that's usually the death trap of everything, right? Sales is how you figure out what you should build. You don't let your ideas figure out. When we sold Papa John's, a mobile ordering system that we sold them, we had spent $2,500 building a prototype. $2,500. We spent $250,000 selling it. Okay? But you know what? When they signed that contract, we had another partner on the other side telling us what they really wanted. Right? We were sitting there as a bunch of computer nerds trying to develop an online ordering system with no institutional knowledge about all the problems with the industry. When we went and sold them, and we didn't waste our time trying to think we were smarter than they were. Right? We rode, they quite frankly gave us half of the intellectual knowledge, that institutional knowledge we needed to develop it. With Brian and Connor with Stadium Run, okay? Let me tell you this. We started off working with Airmark, right? We want them on board, right? Who operate, I don't know, 100 different stadiums across the country. When they tell us what it needs to do and we build it to what they want, right? It's not like the customer can come and say, you know, that's a bad idea. They came up with it, right? Same thing with Papa John's. They were a partner in building it, right? You do not want to build something and pray they will come. You want to build a concept that you can sell, attach the right partner, right, who is the user that has the institutional knowledge, and you become the partner with them in building whatever that is. I don't care if that's a bumper, right? You go sell Toyota on the idea of your bumper long before you go ever manufacture 1 million of them, right? It's the same thing. You have to think about sales very early in the process, and the best process is always sell it and build it to the order, not build it and hope it will come.
Anybody else have questions?
Harry, I'll give a quick explanation of Stadium Runner, just for the people that don't know what it is.
Yeah, Stadium Runner is actually very, very simple. You go to FSU football game, you sit in A23, you have an app, you say, I'm sitting in A23, you order hot dog, hamburger, french fries, whatever, and they bring it to you.
Is there a
Paid on
website?
the phone, and stadiumrunner.com is the site. And it's, let me tell you again, when you go to a football game and you go, 2 parents and 3 kids, I can't carry 5 drinks, 5 hot dogs, and 5 hamburgers. So let me tell you, it becomes a very important piece.
That's a good question. What other questions do we have? Looks like we're winding down. That was.
Yeah, so when you talk about sell before you build,
Yeah.
so when you want to sell something, you need to do some kind of market research, some kind of thing like that, right? So how do you identify that hole in the market so you can go in there and sell?
Well, that piece right there is the magic, right? I mean, the piece of finding a hole in anything, right, is always searching for a needle in a haystack. I mean, that's the part that's the first piece, right? There are a lot more opportunities out there, especially the way that technology is evolving and changing these platforms. There's no secret answer to finding the hole, right, or finding that needle in a haystack. But what I can tell you this, when you think you have found the needle in the haystack, call somebody who would buy it and ask them, not just ask your best friend. Right? I mean, if the guy who says he'll buy it, and now let me explain or try to explain what somebody who will buy it means. Okay? Example, I work with the guys with war paint. Okay? I don't mean call Bill's bookstore and say, is this a good idea? Okay? Because Bill's bookstore is going to buy, at best, 1,000 units a year, I'm going to say. If I know to hit my target, I got to sell 1 million units a year. I'm not going to pick up the phone and call somebody who sells less than 300,000 units a year, right? Because that guy will tell you the truth. Here's the difference. If I'm selling plants, okay, or plants, I'm going to use plants as an example, and I want to find out whether I got this, I mean, let's say I'm going to go over see they make a cocktail tree. It's got like lemons, limes, and some other fruit on it, right? Put in your thing, mix cocktails. If I want to sell those, okay, I pick up and call Tallahassee Nurseries, and I say, will you sell this? Great idea. Local company. The reality is they rode on your relationship and thought that you were a local person, and there could have been a lot of reasons why they may have said yes. You call the buyer of Lowe's, okay, who can sell 500,000 of those plants for you a year, and you see if he's really interested, and then you'll find out if there really is a market for what you have. The guy that you call to try to sell, don't ask him to buy anything, ask him to help you, right? Because let me tell you, everybody wants to help somebody, right? And remember what I said earlier? Call somebody who can help you and ask them to help you. Kind of starting to make sense, right? Call somebody who can help you. Key is can help you, and ask him to help you. Not ask him to buy something, ask him to help you.
JT, what's your next big project that you're working on?
That's secret. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe you can tell me. I really don't, I mean, I'll tell you, Brian Connor are the perfect example of that. What I see as the big project right now is networking the university, working in this community to help build the culture like Vincent is building, and helping people realize that there really are innovative, creative people, and working on building capital in this community to support that ecosystem, and understanding what all the pieces are. Hunter and Harp, which is a division who is into placemaking, does also have some very exciting upcoming projects that hopefully first of the year will be announced that I think would be some real game changers for the community.
I think soon.
So when you're talking about calling somebody and saying, can you give me a hand, you're talking on this person making a deal with them that they're going to get a cut of whatever you make, right? How do you set that up? Or is it really a friendship thing?
People really just want to help you.
I thought.
So many people, and let me tell you, when people get screwed, yes, they get screwed. Here's the thing. I could sit here, and if I came up with this cup, and this is the greatest cup in the world, I could sit here and give every one of you guys a copy of it, and you probably still couldn't do anything with it anyway, right? People's fear, right, of losing something they don't have stops them from asking the right person to help them. And they don't, what they're missing is Papa John's, they were never going to steal our idea. The dumbest thing we did is, I mean, finally one day a light bulb went off and said, why are we beating on every door when we beat on this one door and behind this one door are 3,000 stores, right? I can spend my time and effort going and selling Drew at this one location, right? And let's say I spend, you know, I had to spend a multiple of 10 of what I would take to sell Drew to land Papa John's, but instead of getting 10 stores, I got 3,000, right? People want to help you. People are not into this, I don't lock the door of my house. You know why? Because 99% of the world is not out to take anything from me, right? People are good people. If we watch the news, there's a lot of bad people, but man, they are one heck of a low percentage. And let me tell you this, I'm not saying don't lock your door, just a personal opinion that I believe overall most people are good, and most people, if given the chance, will help you as long as they don't have fear, right? A lot of people will not help you if they're afraid, but somebody who is afraid, right? Somebody who is scared will take something from you. Somebody who is afraid will not help you.
Do we have any other questions? I think we're actually winding it down, and I don't want to, I mean, because you've given us so much of your time.
I've bored people to sleep. So.
I think they're like engaged in it. I mean, how many people in this room was helped? You don't have to clap, just raise your hand. I think this was awesome. I think it gives us a different perspective of business and what we're doing. I think that it's awesome. We're going to all just give JT a round of applause.